My ex-husband's girlfriend scoffed that she needed an office cleaner and found me suitable for the position, so I accepted, and what followed left her shocked. My name is Elena. I'm 46 years old, and I'm going to tell you the most painful and, at the same time, most liberating story of my life. It's a story about humiliation, discovery, and, above all, finding strength where I didn't even know it existed. It all started on March 15th, what should have been my 46th birthday. I had prepared everything with so much care. I bought special ingredients to make the lasagna that Michael had always loved, decorated the living room with blue and gold balloons, and even bought a wine that cost almost half my week's salary. I wanted it to be perfect, an opportunity for us to reconnect as a family. David, my ex-husband, arrived punctually at 7, bringing our former family life wrapped in his politely distant expression. Michael, our 17-year-old son, came in right behind him, glued to his phone as always. For a moment when I lit the candles on the cake, I thought that maybe, just maybe, we could pretend we were a normal family celebrating a birthday. "Mom, can I say something?" Michael said, finally looking up from his phone. His tone made me freeze inside, but I forced a hopeful smile. "Of course, honey. What is it?" David cleared his throat and crossed his arms. "Elena, we need to be honest here. Michael and I talked and, well, it's about Sophia." Sophia, the successful businesswoman girlfriend that David had met 6 months after our divorce. At 34, she had everything I apparently no longer had. Youth, money, a brilliant career, and that confidence that only comes when you've never had to clean anyone's bathroom to survive. "Michael is 17 now," David continued, "and he needs to think about the future. Sophia offered him an internship at her company, important connections. She can give him opportunities that you can't." I felt like all the air had been ripped from my lungs. "David, I work 2 extra hours a day just to pay for his English classes," I said. "Mom, stop," Michael cut me off. There was something cruel in his voice that I had never heard before. "You work as a janitor. Sophia is CEO of 3 companies. She has a Mercedes. You have a 2009 Honda. She lives in a penthouse. You live in this small apartment that always smells like cleaning products." Each word was like a slap in the face. "Michael, you're only good for cleaning bathrooms," he shouted, getting up from his chair. "Sophia understands me. She sees potential in me. You only remind me of what I don't want to become." The silence that followed was deafening. David said nothing to defend him or me. He just stood there, looking at his own hands. Michael grabbed his jacket and headed for the door. "Where are you going?" I asked, my voice coming out as a whisper. "To Sophia's house. She's throwing a real party with important people. Not this." The door slammed. David mumbled some words about Michael going through a difficult phase and left soon after, leaving me alone with the untouched cake and the wreckage of what was once my family. I blew out the candles one by one, making the only wish I had left, strength not to completely fall apart. I spent the next few hours sitting on the kitchen floor, hugging my knees, trying to understand how I had gotten to this point. Where had I gone wrong? How could the son I had loved unconditionally for 17 years speak to me like that? How could the man I had been married to for 15 years watch it all in silence? I remembered the last few years, how I had worked myself to death to pay for Michael's private school, tutoring classes, the English course he wanted to take. I remembered how I ate bologna sandwiches so I could buy meat for him, how I drove my noisy Honda to every corner of the city whenever he needed to go somewhere. And for what? To be called a failure at my own birthday party. 3 days later, I was at the Whole Foods supermarket, buying the cheapest ingredients I could find when I saw her. Sophia was in the imported wine section, impeccable as always, wearing a blazer that probably cost more than my rent. I thought about changing aisles, avoiding the embarrassment, but it was too late. She had already seen me. "Elena," she said, approaching with that smile that never reached her eyes. "What a coincidence running into you here." "Hi, Sophia," I replied, trying to sound casual while discreetly hiding my basket with generic brand products. "You know," she continued, her voice sweet as poisoned. "Honey, I was thinking about you these days. You know I have a consulting company, right? Well, I need someone to clean the office." I felt the blush rise up my neck. Around us, other people started paying attention to the conversation. "The work is at night, from 11 p.m. to 6 a.m. It's $12 an hour. It's good money for this type of service, don't you think?" She made a theatrical pause. "Of course, I know you have experience in the area." The humiliation was palpable. An elderly lady next to us stopped looking at labels and watched us with poorly disguised curiosity. A young couple whispered to each other, clearly entertaining themselves with the drama. For a moment, all of Michael's cruel words echoed in my head. "You're only good for cleaning bathrooms." But then something strange happened. Instead of anger or shame, I felt a cold calm take over me. It was as if a different part of me had awakened, a part that was tired of being stepped on. "You know what, Sophia?" I said, keeping my voice firm and polite. "I accept the job." Her smile wavered for a fraction of a second. Clearly, she expected me to refuse, to run away humiliated, but I was no longer the same Elena who had been destroyed 3 days ago. "Great," she replied, regaining her composure. "You can start Monday. The building is on Peachtree Street, number 1247, 15th floor. Ask for the night supervisor. He'll show you what needs to be done." "Perfect," I said, and for the first time in months my smile was genuine. "I'm sure I'll learn a lot working there." Sophia frowned slightly, as if trying to decipher something in my tone, but I was already walking away. As I walked through the supermarket aisles, I felt something I hadn't felt in a long time. Purpose. She thought she was humiliating me, putting me in my place. What she didn't know was that she had just given me access to what I needed most. Sometimes the best revenge is simply accepting what the enemy offers and using it against them. Sophia was about to discover that not every janitor is invisible, and not every broken woman stays on the ground forever. There was something in her eyes when she offered that job, a calculated malice that told me there was more behind the offer than simple cruelty. She wanted to have me around, wanted to see me humiliated daily, wanted to make sure I knew what my place was in the new order of things. Well, she was going to get exactly what she wanted, and much more than she imagined. The following Monday at 10:45 p.m., I was in front of the building on Peachtree Street, wearing my most presentable janitor uniform and carrying my old leather bag that my mother had given me years ago. The building was imposing, all glass and steel, the kind of place where important people make important decisions, or at least pretend to make them. Jerry, the night supervisor, was a man of about 60 with kind eyes and a tired smile. "You must be Elena," he said, greeting me in the reception. "Mrs. Montenegro left specific instructions about your work." "Montenegro? I didn't even know that was her last name." "She said you'll mainly take care of the 15th floor. That's where her company's executive offices are. Very important, lots of confidential paperwork there." As we went up in the elevator, Jerry explained the basic rules: always wear gloves, never touch documents on desks, vacuum after cleaning surfaces, and most importantly, always lock everything when finished. "Mrs. Montenegro is very strict about security," he said, handing me a set of keys. "These are yours. She insists that each employee has individual access for responsibility issues." The 15th floor was elegant, in a cold and intimidating way. Offices with glass walls, modern furniture, plants that probably cost more than my monthly salary, and silence, that kind of silence that only exists in places where secrets are kept. I started with Sophia's office. It was exactly as I imagined, an imposing mahogany desk, framed diplomas on the wall, a photo of her shaking hands with some local politician. But it was when I started cleaning around the desk that I noticed something interesting. There were papers scattered around, as if she had left in a hurry. And contrary to the rules Jerry had mentioned, she had left everything totally accessible. 2 open folders showed financial reports. I'm not an accountant, but I know how to read basic numbers. And those numbers didn't make sense. Montenegro Consulting showed profits of $2 million in 2023, but right below there was another report, from the same company, showing losses of $1.8 million. 2 completely different versions of the same reality. My heart started racing. I took out my phone and carefully photographed the documents. I didn't know exactly what I was seeing, but I knew it wasn't normal for a company to have 2 such different accounting records. In the following weeks, I developed a routine. I always arrived 15 minutes early and left 15 minutes late. Officially, I was being extra dedicated to work. In reality, I was using this extra time to explore. Sophia was even more careless than I had imagined. She left important contracts on the table, emails open on the computer, even passwords written on post-its stuck to the monitor. That's how I discovered the scheme. Sophia wasn't just a successful businesswoman, she was a sophisticated criminal. Her companies were a complex web of money laundering. She received dirty money from construction companies that wanted to bypass public bidding, laundered this money through fake consulting contracts, and returned part of it clean while keeping a generous percentage. I documented everything. I photographed contracts where she offered public management consulting to companies that clearly didn't need this type of service. I found emails where she negotiated bribes for city inspectors in exchange for turning a blind eye to irregular constructions. There was even a notebook where she wrote down amounts in code: Project A, 250,000 input, 180,000 output, 70,000 commission. The most impressive thing was her audacity. In a locked drawer, which she forgot to lock half the time, there was a folder marked insurance. Inside, I found documents that made my blood freeze: phantom contractor contracts, fake invoices, even payment receipts for public employees who didn't even exist. It was an empire built on lies and corruption. But there was something more disturbing: photos. Sophia kept photos of social events where she distributed bribes: her at the country club with the city's public works secretary, her at an expensive restaurant with a federal revenue inspector, her at a private party with judges and prosecutors, as if it were a trophy, proof of how much power she had accumulated through corruption. In one of these photos, I recognized David in the background, smiling and toasting with a champagne glass. The date showed it was from 2 weeks ago. My ex-husband wasn't just dating a criminal, he was being used as a social facade, validation that Sophia was a family woman, trustworthy enough to be beside a respectable man. The most ironic thing was that David thought he had won over a successful and independent woman. In reality, he was just another accessory in her scheme, a way to appear more respectable to the important contacts she needed to corrupt. But the most shocking discovery came when I started cleaning other offices in the same building. Apparently, Sophia wasn't the only interesting tenant in the building. On the 12th floor, there was an FBI office, and on the 13th, a prosecutor's office specialized in financial crimes. It was on a Thursday, around 3 a.m., that I heard voices coming from the 12th floor. Normally the building was silent as a tomb at this hour, but there was light on and people talking. Curious, I discreetly went down and noticed that the door was ajar. "Montenegro is smarter than we thought," said a male voice. "She has at least 12 shell companies, all interconnected. It's going to be difficult to trace the money." "We can't wait much longer," replied a female voice. "We have information that she's planning to transfer assets to the Cayman Islands. If that happens, we lose everything. We need more evidence, something that sticks in court. What we have so far is circumstantial. And the informant, can't he get closer?" "He's trying, but she's getting more and more paranoid. Changed system passwords 3 times this month." I returned to the 15th floor with my heart racing. It wasn't just a casual discovery. There was a federal investigation underway. Sophia was being hunted by professionals, and I had in the palm of my hand evidence they were probably desperate to find. That night, when I got home, I poured everything onto my laptop. I organized the photos by date, created a spreadsheet with the amounts I had found, and even made notes explaining the context of each document. It was like putting together a macabre puzzle where each piece revealed another layer of the lie on which Sophia had built her life. The most ironic thing is that she continued to treat me with that condescending disdain whenever we crossed paths in the building. "How's work going, Elena?" she asked with that fake smile. "I hope you're learning a lot." If she knew I was learning much more than she imagined, maybe she wouldn't smile so much. Meanwhile, I also discovered that her financial situation wasn't as solid as it seemed. Behind the facade of success, Sophia owed almost $3 million in back taxes. There were dozens of labor lawsuits against her companies, employees who didn't receive salaries, exploited contractors, benefits cut without notice, and the most surprising thing, technically, all her companies were bankrupt. That entire empire was a house of cards sustained by dirty money and lies. But what impressed me most was how she managed to maintain the farce. During the day, she was the successful executive who impressed my ex-husband and my son at night when I was there cleaning the traces of her crimes. Reality was quite different. She was desperate, racing against time, trying to move money before authorities closed in. And I, the simple janitor who was only good for cleaning bathrooms, was documenting her every move. Sometimes life has a very peculiar sense of humor. While I collected evidence against Sophia during the nights, my days were filled with a loneliness that seemed to have no end. David and Michael not only continued to ignore me, they had created a new life where I simply didn't exist. I discovered this in the worst possible way, through social media. David had posted Thanksgiving photos where he, Michael, and Sophia appeared smiling around an elegantly set table. The caption said, "Grateful for the new family that life gave me." Michael commented with hearts and a phrase that destroyed me. "First Thanksgiving, that's really worth celebrating." The table was set with fine china, crystal glasses, and a perfectly golden turkey that probably cost more than my monthly grocery bill. Sophia appeared radiant, wearing an elegant dress, serving wine as if she were the perfect hostess of the perfect family. David looked at her with admiration, and Michael seemed genuinely happy. For the first time in years, I tried calling Michael the next day. The phone rang once before going straight to voicemail. I sent a message, "Hi, honey. Just wanted to know how you are. I miss you." 2 blue check marks, read and ignored. I tried again at Christmas and New Year's. Always the same pattern, viewed, ignored. It was as if I had died but was still alive to feel the pain of absence. The nights became my refuge and my torture. I worked in the building until 6 a.m., came home and tried to sleep, but sleep wouldn't come. I lay looking at the ceiling, thinking about everything I had lost, about how I had failed as a mother and wife. I started taking melatonin, then stronger medications. Nothing worked. During these months of insomnia, I began to have recurring nightmares. I dreamed I was at a party where everyone pointed and laughed at me, shouting, "She's only good for cleaning bathrooms." I woke up in panic, with my heart racing and sweaty hands. Other times, I dreamed that Michael was a child again, calling me mommy with that sweet little voice he had at 5 years old. But when I tried to hug him, he disappeared. The worst moment came when I went to the supermarket and found David with Sophia in the checkout line. They were buying ingredients for some special recipe, salmon, asparagus, expensive white wine, things David never bought when we were married because it was too expensive for our budget. Now he held the basket like an attentive husband, while Sophia chose imported cheeses. I tried to leave without being seen, but Michael appeared, running down the aisle with a box of expensive cereals in his hand. "Dad, Sophia said I can choose any cereal I want," he shouted, excited like a child at Christmas. That's when he saw me. For a second, our eyes met. I expected to see some recognition, maybe a little guilt or longing, but all I saw was discomfort. He looked around as if checking if anyone saw us together, then muttered an almost inaudible hi and ran back to be near David and Sophia. At that moment, I understood that I had become a source of shame for my own son. It wasn't just that he preferred Sophia. It was that my presence embarrassed him. I was a reminder of a life he wanted to forget, of a standard of living he found humiliating. It was on a Friday, almost a year after I started working for Sophia, that I received the most painful confirmation that my family really considered me dead. Michael posted a photo on his Instagram of him graduating from high school. David was there, impeccable in a new suit, smiling proudly. Sophia was also in the photo, wearing an elegant dress as if she were blood family. The caption said, "Thank you to the people who really matter." Next stop, University of Georgia. I didn't even know he had graduated. I didn't know he had been accepted to university. 17 years raising a son, and I discovered the milestones of his life through social media. I cried so much that night, I thought my heart would explode. But the next day, I returned to the building on Peachtree Street with renewed determination. If my family had discarded me like trash, at least I was going to make sure they discovered who Sophia really was. And then, On a March morning, almost a year after I started working for Sophia, everything changed. I was at home, trying to sleep after the night shift, when I heard sirens, many sirens. I looked out the window and saw FBI cars speeding toward downtown. I turned on the TV and there it was, Operation Georgian Car Wash, local businesswoman arrested for $1 million corruption scheme. Sophia appeared on screen, being led in handcuffs into a black car. Perfect hair disheveled, blazer wrinkled, that arrogant smile replaced by an expression of pure panic. The reporter explained that she was accused of leading a money laundering scheme that involved at least $15 million over 3 years. The suspect operated a complex network of shell companies, said the reporter, diverting public resources through fraudulent consulting contracts. According to the FBI, Montenegro used her social position to corrupt public officials and facilitate fraudulent bidding for allied companies. My phone rang. It was David. Elena, did you see the news? His voice was different. There was no longer that polite coldness. There was pure desperation without disguises. I saw, I replied calmly. I didn't know, Elena. I invested all my savings in her companies, the retirement, the money that was for Michael's college, everything. She said I would have a guaranteed 20% annual return. I closed my eyes. Of course he had done that. David was always greedy, always looking for the easy path to success. How much? I asked. $250,000. My stomach froze, not because I felt sorry for him, but because I knew Michael would also be affected by this. And now, did the FBI confiscate everything? Everything, Elena. They closed the companies, blocked the accounts, confiscated the assets. I'm going to lose the apartment. I'm already 3 months behind on rent. There was a long silence. I could hear David breathing heavily on the other side of the line. Does Michael know? He knows. The whole school knows. They're calling Sophia the criminal stepmother. He's being humiliated every day. Part of me, a small and vindictive part, felt a dark satisfaction. They had humiliated me, discarded me, treated me like trash. Now they were reaping the consequences of their choices. But the bigger part of me, the part that was still a mother, worried about Michael. How was he dealing with this? Badly. Very badly. He doesn't even want to leave the house. Says everyone at school is mocking him. And the worst thing is, he lost his scholarship to university. Sophia had promised to pay. The irony was almost poetic. Michael had rejected me because I was just a janitor and had chosen the successful businesswoman. Now he discovered that the successful businesswoman was a criminal and the failed janitor was the only person in the family who had her finances in order. I hung up the phone and stood looking at the TV screen where they showed images of Sophia's office being sealed by federal police, the same office I had cleaned for months, where I had discovered secret after secret. That afternoon, David called again. Elena, I know we have no right to ask for anything, but could you maybe lend some money? Just until I get reorganized. Lend? I repeated. It's temporary. I'll pay it back as soon as I get a better job. Michael, he needs therapy. All this is affecting him a lot. I remained silent, processing the irony of the situation. The man who had humiliated me, who had let our son call me useless, was now begging for help from the failed janitor. David, I said finally, I'll think about it. But I already knew what my answer would be. That night, when I arrived at the building to work, I found Jerry packing his things. It's over, Elena, he said with a sad smile. With Montenegro's arrest, the contract was canceled. It's the last day. I looked at the elevator that took me to the 15th floor, where I had spent so many nights discovering the truth. In a way, it was appropriate that it ended like this. My mission was complete. Even though I never sent the evidence to the FBI, they had discovered everything on their own, or perhaps through other sources. But I had something they didn't have. The satisfaction of knowing I had seen the fall up close, that I had been invisible enough to witness every lie, every crime, every moment of Sophia's desperation before she was finally captured. Sometimes the best revenge is simply being patient and letting criminals destroy themselves. 2 weeks after Sophia's arrest, I was at the supermarket shopping when I heard my name being shouted. It was Michael walking toward me with his face red with anger, my heart filled with hope for a second. Maybe he finally wanted to talk. Maybe he needed his mother. You, he shouted, loud enough for half the supermarket to look. This is all your fault, Michael. I froze. No, you ruined my life. There were tears of anger in his eyes. If you weren't a failure, if you weren't just a pathetic janitor, Sophia would never have done what she did. The people around us stopped pretending they weren't listening. An elderly lady looked at me with pity. A young couple whispered to each other. I felt small, but this time it wasn't because of the humiliation they were causing me. It was because of the pain of seeing my son so lost. Michael, Sophia made choices. She only did that because she wanted to give me a better future. Because she knew I deserved more than this. He gestured toward me as if I were something disgusting. If it weren't for you, if she didn't have to get me out of this mediocre life, she wouldn't have risked so much. His logic was completely distorted, but I could see that he really believed what he was saying. Sophia had become a kind of martyr in his head. A woman who had sacrificed everything to save him from an ordinary life. And now she's gone, he continued, his voice breaking. The only person who really understood me, who saw potential in me, is gone because of you. You ruined everything. He stormed out, leaving me in the middle of the cereal aisle with all those people looking at me. I paid for my groceries quickly and went home, where I cried until I had no more tears. But they weren't tears of guilt. They were tears of mourning. I was finally mourning the son I thought I had raised, accepting that the young man who blamed me for a criminal's crimes was no longer the child I had loved unconditionally. The worst was yet to come. The next night, David appeared at my door. He hadn't called, hadn't warned. He just appeared, with deep dark circles and wrinkled clothes that smelled of alcohol and desperation. "Elena, we need to talk." I let him in, offered coffee. He sat on my old sofa, the same sofa where we once watched movies as a family, and looked at me with an expression I couldn't decipher. There was anger there, but also something more disturbing, a desperate need to find someone to blame who wasn't himself. "Michael talked to me about yesterday," he said, running his hands through his disheveled hair. "About what happened at the supermarket. David, he's suffering. I understand that. You don't understand what we lost, what I lost because of your pathetic existence." He got up and started pacing the room like a caged animal. $250,000, Elena. 20 years of work, 20 years saving to have a better life. And now I'm worse off than when we got married. Worse than when I was a kid at my parents' house. "David, I'm sorry for what happened, but..." "You know what's most ironic?" he continued, ignoring my words. "If you weren't who you are, if you had at least tried to be someone in life, Sophia would never have had this need to show us how to really live." I blinked, not believing what I was hearing. "Are you blaming me for her crimes?" "I'm saying that if you were a real wife, a real mother, someone Michael could be proud of, Sophia wouldn't have felt she needed to compensate for your deficiencies." His voice went up an octave. "She saw how our son was humiliated for having a janitor mother, how he suffered for not being able to bring friends home because you always smelled like disinfectant." The absurdity of the accusation left me speechless for a moment, but then something inside me broke, or maybe it was fixed. I got up slowly, feeling a strange calm taking over my body. "Get out," I said, my voice low but firm as steel. "Elena." "Get out of my house," I shouted, pointing to the door. "Get out now before I call the police." David looked at me as if I had lost my mind. "Elena, be reasonable. We're all going through a difficult time. We can't let..." "You made your choice," I said, walking to the door and opening it. "You humiliated me, discarded me, treated me like trash. You told the whole world that I was only good for cleaning bathrooms. And now you want me to save you from the consequences of your choices. Elena, think about Michael. He's your son. Michael made it very clear that he doesn't want a janitor mother in his life, that I only serve to clean bathrooms, remember? So, let Sophia's perfect memory take care of him. I won't beg for crumbs of love from my own family anymore." David stood there for a moment, as if he couldn't process that I was really kicking him out. There was something almost comical in his expression, as if the world had turned upside down and he couldn't understand the new rules. "You'll regret this," he said finally, his voice carrying an empty threat. "The only thing I regret," I replied, "is that it took me 46 years to realize I deserve more than being treated like a second-class citizen by my own family." I slammed the door shut, and for the first time in months, smiled. A genuine smile that came from some deep place inside me that I thought had died. 3 days later, my phone rang. It was David again, but this time his voice was different. Less anger, more pure desperation. "Elena, I know our last conversation wasn't ideal, but I need you to listen. We're going to be evicted on Friday. Michael is desperate. He said maybe you could help us. That maybe he was wrong about some things." So now Michael maybe was wrong. Not because he had discovered he loved me, or because he missed me, or because he finally understood the value of the sacrifice I had made for years, but because they needed my money. "David," I said, my voice calm as ice, "you made it very clear that I only serve to clean bathrooms, that I'm a failure, that I ruined your lives simply by existing. Elena, please, you can't be so cruel." "Cruel?" I laughed, a dry sound that had no humor at all. Cruel was being called a failure at my own birthday party. Cruel was being blamed for the crimes of a woman I didn't even choose to know. Cruel was finding out my own son graduated from high school through social media. "Elena, Michael is your son." Michael is a 17-year-old young man who had the opportunity to have a mother who loved him unconditionally and chose the woman with dirty money. Now he's going to learn that choices have consequences, but he's suffering. He lost his university scholarship. Friends are mocking him. And when I was suffering, when you publicly humiliated me, where was your concern? When I worked 12 hours a day to pay for his private school, did you care if I was tired? When I ate bologna sandwiches so I could buy meat for you, did anyone ask if I was hungry? The silence on the other side of the line lasted almost a full minute. "So that's it?" David finally asked. "You're going to abandon us?" "I'm not abandoning you," I replied calmly. "You abandoned me a long time ago. I'm just finally accepting the reality you created." I hung up the phone, and, for the first time in years, managed to sleep a full night without nightmares. Sometimes dignity is worth more than the love of people who only look for us when they need something. And sometimes saying no is the first step to finding the yes that really matters. With Sophia imprisoned and my family finally out of my life definitively, I decided it was time to rebuild. Not just survive, but really live. For the first time in years, I started making plans that were just mine, dreams that didn't depend on anyone's approval. During my years as a janitor, I had taken 2 technical courses online, small business administration and human resources management. I always thought it would be useful to get a better job, but now I saw a bigger possibility. With the savings I had religiously saved during the last few years, money that David and Michael never knew existed, I had enough capital to start something of my own. Elena's Cleaning Solutions was born on a Tuesday morning when I signed the LLC papers at City Hall. It wasn't just a cleaning company, it was my Declaration of Independence. But there was something special in my business plan that no traditional cleaning company had. I wanted to specifically hire women who had gone through difficult situations, traumatic divorces, domestic violence, family rejection, long-term unemployment. The first employee I hired was Carmen, a 38-year-old woman who had lost everything when she discovered her husband was cheating on her with her best friend. 20 years of marriage thrown in the trash, she told me during the interview, trying not to cry. He kept the house, the friends, even the dog. Said I never knew how to do anything but be a housewife. The second was Janet, 52 years old, who had been fired after 20 years at the same company when they restructured and hired younger people for lower salaries. They said I didn't adapt to new technologies, she told me with bitterness in her voice. But the truth is, it was too expensive to keep someone with my salary level. The third was Maria, 29 years old, who had fled an abusive relationship with 2 small children and had no work references because her ex-husband forbade her to work. He said I was too stupid to work, she whispered during our conversation, that no employer would want me. Each of them had a story of strength disguised as fragility, and each of them understood the value of a second chance. We started small, with residential contracts and some small offices downtown. But our company's differential wasn't just the quality of service, it was discretion and observation. When you're invisible long enough, you learn to see things other people don't see, and in our line of work, this became our greatest asset. It was during a cleaning contract at a law firm that Carmen discovered that one of the partners was embezzling money from clients' pension funds. She showed me the papers she had found, accidentally scattered on the table. Elena, look at these numbers, they don't match what's in the official report. Janet, cleaning an accountant's office, noticed irregularities in the books of a small construction company that hadn't paid taxes for 3 years. There are 2 accounting records here, she told me, worried. One showing profit, another hiding the real debts. In all cases, we passed the information anonymously to the competent authorities. We weren't looking for trouble, it just appeared in front of us. And when you've already been trampled by life, it's hard to watch other people being deceived without doing anything. In 6 months, Elena's Cleaning Solutions had 15 employees and a waiting list of clients. Not because we were the best janitors in the city, although we were very good, but because our reputation for integrity had spread. Honest businessmen hired us, knowing their secrets were safe with us, and dishonest businessmen, well, they learned to behave better when they knew we were around. It was during one of these business expansions that I met Robert. He owned a small landscaping company and had hired our services to clean his offices twice a week. Unlike other clients, Robert always greeted the employees by name, asked about their families, left fresh water and coffee for us. It's not common to find an employer who treats people like this. I commented to him one day while Janet cleaned the bathroom and Carmen organized the meeting room. My mother was a janitor for 20 years, he replied, looking out the window where his employees were planting flowers in a client's garden. She always said, you know a person's true character by how they treat those who are serving. Robert was 48 years old, divorced for 5 years, and had a 22-year-old daughter studying veterinary medicine at the University of Georgia. He was kind in a way that made me remember how I used to dream relationships should be, without games, without manipulation, just 2 people who genuinely respected each other. We started having coffee after the girls finished cleaning, simple conversations about work, about plants, about books. We discovered we both liked biographies. He never asked about my past invasively, never made condescending comments about my work. You have something different, he told me one afternoon while we watered the office plants together. You seem like a person who went through a lot but didn't let it destroy you. And how do you know it didn't destroy me? I asked, curious. Because you hire broken women and teach them to fly again. Destroyed people don't do that. It was the first time in years that someone saw strength in me instead of weakness. After 8 months dating, if I could call our coffees and simple dinners dating, Robert asked me to move in with him. He had a small but cozy house in Decatur with a garden in the back, where he grew organic vegetables, and a yard where his daughter had planted a tree when she was a child. You don't have to move if you don't want to, he said, nervous like a teenager. But I thought maybe you'd like to wake up every morning seeing something beautiful instead of apartment buildings. The house had a view of a small lake. For the first time in my life, I would wake up every morning looking at moving water, at flying birds, at the possibility of peace. I moved on a Friday in September. Carmen, Janet, and Maria came to help me, and we ended up having a small housewarming party in the backyard. Robert barbecued, the girls brought salads, and for the first time in years I felt part of a real family. A family I had chosen, not one that had tolerated me. But the scars of a lifetime don't disappear easily. Even living in a beautiful house, even having a prosperous business, even having found a man who treated me as if I was worth something, there were still nights when I woke up in panic, dreaming that Michael was rejecting me again, that David was calling me a failure, that Sophia was laughing at my naivety. It will pass, Robert told me, hugging me when I woke up sweaty and trembling. Not immediately, but it will pass. Years later, I discovered he was partially right. The The wounds healed, but the scars remained. And maybe it was better that way. They reminded me never to accept being treated as less than I deserved again. Michael looked for me sporadically after he moved to university. Always when he needed money, medical emergencies, expensive books, car repairs. I lent small amounts but kept emotional distance. I had learned the difference between love and need, between longing and convenience. How can you be so cold with him? Robert asked once after I hung up from another loan request from Michael. I'm not cold, I replied. I'm careful. He had 17 years to learn to love me unconditionally. Now he has the rest of his life to discover if he wants a real relationship with me or just a bank account with feelings. My new partner was understanding, but I knew he couldn't completely fill the void left by the family that rejected me. It wasn't his job. Some wounds we carry alone, and that's okay. The most painful discovery came 3 years later. On an ordinary morning, while I was having coffee and checking social media before going to work, a notification on Instagram caught my attention. Michael had tagged a location at a church in Athens, Georgia. I clicked on the photo, and my heart stopped. It was his wedding. Michael was radiant in a rented tuxedo next to a blonde and smiling girl I had never seen before. David was there, impeccable in a dark suit, proud as I had always dreamed he would be at our son's wedding. There were groomsmen, bridesmaids, elegant guests, expensive flowers, everything a mother dreams of seeing at her son's wedding. I hadn't been invited. I didn't even know he was dating seriously. The photo caption said, "The happiest day of my life. Thank you to everyone who made this possible." There were tags of dozens of people. University friends, work colleagues, distant relatives I didn't even know he knew. Everyone except me. In the comments, David wrote, "Proud of the man you've become, son. Your mother would be proud. Your mother, as if I had died, as if I had never existed." I stared at that photo for hours. Robert found me crying in the kitchen when he came home from work. "What happened?" he asked, kneeling beside me. "He got married," I said, showing him the phone. "My son got married, and I found out through Instagram." Robert looked at the photo in silence, then hugged me. He didn't say everything would be okay, didn't try to minimize the pain. He just held me while I cried for the last time for the family I had lost. In the following months, I continued following Michael's life through social media like a stranger watching a celebrity's life. I saw when they moved to a small but nice apartment in Atlanta. I saw when he got a job at a marketing company. I saw photos of the vacation they took in Florida. Always happy, always without mentioning a word about me. And then, a year after the wedding, came the photo that completely broke me. Michael holding a baby. A small and perfect boy with his father's dark eyes and a toothless smile that reminded me of baby Michael. "Meet my prince, Lucas," said the caption. The love of my life arrived to complete our family. I was a grandmother. I had a grandson named Lucas, and I only learned of his existence through an Instagram photo. That night, I created a digital album on my computer. I saved all the photos of Lucas I could find on social media, the first days in the hospital, the first smile, the first bath, the first steps. I organized everything by date as if I were documenting the life of a child I knew personally. It was pathetic, and I knew it. But it was the only way I had to participate in my grandson's life, even from afar, even though he would never know I existed. "You should try contact," Robert told me one night, finding me organizing the photos once again. Maybe the baby's arrival changed something. I tried once. I sent a simple message to Michael. "I heard you became a father. Congratulations. If you ever want me to meet my grandson, I would like that very much." The response came 2 days later. "Thank you. I don't think it's a good idea right now. Maybe in the future." Maybe in the future. The phrase every rejected mother knows. A polite way of saying never. But I don't want to seem completely cruel. I learned to carry that pain with dignity. I continued working, expanding my company, taking care of my employees as if they were family. Because in the end, family isn't just who shares your blood. It's who chooses to stay by your side when things get difficult. 3 years passed. Elena's Cleaning Solutions now had 25 employees and contracts with some of Atlanta's biggest companies. Carmen had become my partner, Janet managed day-to-day operations, and Maria had opened a franchise in Savannah. We all had stories of pain that we had transformed into strength. It was during one of these expansions that I decided to formalize something I had been doing informally for years, create a support group for mothers rejected by their children. We rented a small room in a Methodist church every Wednesday night, and there we met. Women of all ages and situations united by the common pain of family rejection. There was Sarah, 60 years old, whose daughter hadn't spoken to her for 15 years because of a misunderstanding about inheritance. There was Lisa, 45, whose twin children chose to live with their rich father instead of staying with her after the divorce. And Margaret, 55, who was rejected by her daughter when she came out as lesbian at 50. "What hurts most," Margaret said in one of the meetings, "isn't the rejection itself. It's the feeling that you failed as a mother, that everything you did was in vain." "But it wasn't in vain," I replied, looking at all those brave women. "We loved, we gave everything we had. If they can't see value in that, the problem isn't ours." We started small, just 5 women in a borrowed room. 2 years later, we had 3 groups running at different times to accommodate more than 40 participants. We created a Facebook page, a WhatsApp group, even a website with resources and articles about dealing with family rejection. We weren't professional therapists, but we were something equally valuable, women who understood each other's pain because we had gone through the same experience. Robert and I got married in a small and intimate ceremony in the backyard on a Saturday morning with only 12 guests. Carmen was my maid of honor. The company girls decorated the garden with flowers that Robert had grown especially for the occasion. It didn't have the pomp I always dreamed of for my wedding, but it had something better. People who genuinely cared about us. For someone who took 46 years to find happiness, you're doing very well, Robert joked during our vows, making me laugh through tears. For someone who married a woman who comes with enough emotional baggage for an international move, you're very brave, I replied, drawing laughter from the guests. It wasn't a perfect ending because perfect endings don't exist. Michael still looked for me sporadically when he needed money. David had completely disappeared from my life, and I still had occasional nightmares about that birthday night that changed everything. Lucas grew up in Instagram photos. First birthday, first day of school, first baseball game, and I continued being a silent observer of his life. But I learned that happiness doesn't mean absence of pain. It means finding purpose despite the pain, building a life worth living, even when some wounds never completely heal. Elena's cleaning solutions became more than a company. It was a symbol that discarded women could rise again and create something meaningful. The support group transformed into a network of strong women who helped each other rediscover their worth. And I, the janitor who was only good for cleaning bathrooms, had become a mentor, a businesswoman, a beloved wife, an example that it's never too late to start over. Sometimes, when I'm organizing Lucas's latest photos in my digital album, Robert asks if I regret anything. I regret taking so long to realize I deserved more, I always answer. But I don't regret having loved, even when that love wasn't valued. The love we give doesn't just define who receives it, it defines who we are. The wound of having lost my son and grandson will never completely heal. But around that wound, I built a life full of purpose, true love, and brave women who, like me, learned that strength doesn't mean not falling. It means getting up every time you fall and deciding it's worth trying again. And in the end, maybe that's the best revenge of all. Not just surviving rejection, but thriving despite it.